I am Jenny, a housewife in my 28s, living with my husband, a company employee. I met my husband while working at a food-related company, and we talked several times about business dealings. I was completely charmed by his occasional smile, and asked him out when I asked him out. He rejected me, saying sorry, unflattered, but I have a girlfriend. However, a month later, he approached me, saying he broke up with his girlfriend. Will you go out with me? Apparently, he started noticing me from the time I confessed, and his girlfriend sensed something was off. Did you fall for someone else? When he agreed with his girlfriend's suggestion of maybe they should break up, they ended their relationship. I felt guilty for ruining his relationship, but he reassured me with a smile, saying it wouldn't have lasted long anyway. Don't worry about it. Comforted by him, we got married after dating for 3 years. When we decided to marry, he said, I'd like to have kids after marriage, so could you be a stay-at-home wife and support me and the children? At that time, I was working at a somewhat harsh company and didn't want to continue working, so I followed his suggestion and chose to become a housewife. The transition from a working woman to a housewife was challenging, but I didn't mind because our newlywed life was blissful. Every day was joyful and happy, and the absence of any mother-in-law problems was a significant factor. My husband's parents' house was just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. I initially feared frequent visits and potential harassment, but that turned out to be an unfounded worry. My husband's parents are very kind, and whenever I say I have a question, they go out of their way to come to our house and kindly explain things to me, despite our struggles to have children. They never complained, even saying to me, "You're more precious than a grandchild. I've always wanted a daughter since our family only had men. Please let me continue to cherish you like my own daughter." I adored my mother-in-law and trusted my quiet but reliable father-in-law. But this harmonious relationship only lasted the first few years as time went by. My once kind in-laws gradually changed, and my father-in-law became even quieter, and my mother-in-law seemed like a different person. Or perhaps this was her true nature. Her attitude towards me went from +100 to -100. My mother-in-law has become quite harsh towards me, frequently visiting our house, especially when my husband isn't around, and nagging me repeatedly, pressuring me to show our grandchild's face soon. "That's your duty as a wife," she'd say. Previously, she'd said children are gifts from heaven. They'll come naturally when the time is right, so don't rush. Moreover, she'd say, be grateful for what you have. Don't be selfish. She compared me to other families, pressing me. The lady next door just had a baby, and the one next to her is pregnant. What about you? But no matter how much she pressed, it was pointless without my husband's willingness. Initially, he wanted children, but a year into our marriage, he lost interest even when I tried to initiate intimacy. My husband declined, saying, "I'm too tired. Maybe another time. Don't disturb me while I'm gaming." Even when I discussed this with my mother-in-law, she didn't understand and kept pushing for a child, increasing my stress day by day. Unable to withstand the attacks from my mother-in-law, I talked to my husband about the pressure to have a grandchild. He casually agreed to try more for a child, saying, "I don't think we need to rush." Despite our efforts, I didn't get pregnant. Moreover, throughout this time, my mother-in-law continuously blamed me, saying, "It's because you're not trying hard enough. My son is not at fault at all." I even suspected that the stress from her was making it harder for me to conceive. Unable to bear the pressure, we finally decided to seek fertility treatment. I thought I could finally relax, but then a different problem arose, troubling me. It was about my husband. Since starting fertility treatment, he became cold towards me, locking himself in his room to play games. Upon returning from work, and even ignoring me when I tried to talk, it would have been bearable if it was just that. But my husband, who got upset about my spending on crafting materials and took out his work stress on me, became increasingly volatile whenever I argued back. He would snap, saying, "Who do you think allows you to live this life? You're just a neat," and continued his selfish behavior, even when I told him I quit my job because you wanted me to. He refused to listen. One day, I found him playing games at home during his usual work hours. I asked, "Aren't you going to work?" He replied, "I quit." I was disgusted with his attitude, but there was nothing I could do about it. Initially, I wasn't panicked about money, thinking I could manage for a while with unemployment benefits and our home savings. However, the stress started building up as my husband showed no interest in finding a new job after quitting his job. My husband started spending all day at home, and I wish he would go outside sometimes, but his hobby is gaming. He hardly ever leaves the house except to buy cigarettes at the convenience store since he stopped working. The amount of time we spend together has significantly increased in the beginning, which might have been seen positively as more time for affection, but now it's different. Just like with my mother-in-law, the increase in time spent with my husband, whose attitude has changed from +100 to -100, has led to more frequent arguments between us. Gradually, I've realized that even just talking to him is stressful, and we've almost stopped conversing altogether. I wonder if there's any point in continuing this kind of married life. I thought beginning to feel like I'm reaching my limit with this marriage. I wanted to find a way out of this situation. One day, fed up with his lazy gaming, I confronted him. "You're not a child. Stop playing games all day and start looking for a job." He then said, "By the way, my mom told me if you can't have a child, we should get divorced." At that moment, I was thankful to my mother-in-law. It was like she was assisting me. Plus, I was pregnant. I found out after a checkup that day and planned to tell him that night, but not telling him turned out to be the right decision. It meant I could distance myself from my mother-in-law and husband. I said, "Okay, I understand. Here are the divorce papers," and handed him the pre-filled form from my dresser. My husband, apparently not expecting me to agree to the divorce, let alone have prepared divorce papers ready, was shocked and frozen when he saw it. Uttering what his usual domineering attitude was nowhere to be seen, he was dumbfounded and wanted to say something, but filled in the papers, believing he must obey his mother. He kept glancing at me while filling them in. We agreed to discuss property division later, but we didn't have much to divide. We didn't need to worry much about dividing assets because we hardly had any. In fact, my husband often spent a lot of money on his hobbies. Not only did he play games at home, but he also seemed to have spent a considerable amount at amusement arcades. He had criticized my spending before, but in reality, he was the one who spent more recklessly than I did. He never had the mindset to save money, even before our marriage. He never saved, and this didn't change after our marriage. So we had no significant assets when we realized there was no property to divide. I thought our discussion was over, but my husband insisted it wasn't and pointed to a bank statement saying, "Don't we still have our savings?" Indeed, that bank statement contained a significant amount of savings, and he suggested we divide it. However, these savings were not subject to division, as the bank statement contained money I saved before our marriage. So it's not part of the property division. His face rapidly turned pale, yet he argued right. But this apartment should be part of the division, right? I lived here too. I had to reveal the harsh truth to him, unfortunately. Unfortunately, the apartment is in my name, so he has no rights to it. Besides, I've already put it up for sale, so he can't live here anymore. Please leave soon, it would be a bother. I told him with a smile, and I had been saving for a house, anticipating that this apartment might become too small in the future. Before marrying, saving money was my hobby, so I had accumulated considerable savings, even as a regular employee. I had bought the apartment with those savings, so I did have some assets with the money from selling the apartment. I could build a nice house in the city center. Of course, all that property was mine from before the marriage, and not included in the division. It seems my husband was unaware of this fact. He apparently thought he would receive half of my property, but unfortunately, for him, that was not the case. Realizing he wouldn't get any part of my property, my husband was left in a difficult situation. Days after that, we continued the discussion, but my husband couldn't snap out of his disappointment, since there wasn't much left to talk about. The discussion ended quickly, and we submitted the divorce papers to the lawyers. Our divorce was successfully finalized a few months later. I returned to my parents' home, and with their support gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom I named Jack. Inspired by the phrase, "a boy's best friend is his mother," now I'm living a fulfilling life with my parents and beloved child. Of course, I haven't informed my ex-husband and his family. I haven't informed them because I'm certain that if I did, my former mother-in-law would surely storm in demanding, "Give me back my grandchild." Meanwhile, my ex-husband, after being kicked out of the apartment, returned to his parents' home. He became a recluse and looked so suspicious that he frequently got stopped by the police. It's quite a pitiful situation. Later, I learned that the reason my husband quit his job was due to souring work relationships. Apparently, my ex-husband was disliked at his company for his bad mouth, especially by female colleagues, and eventually, everyone started ignoring him. Unable to endure this situation, he suddenly quit his job one day. He might have been this way even before our marriage, only kind towards me, a real wolf in sheep's clothing. 3 years later, I'm working as a manager of a craft store. When I became a regular at a local craft store, the manager, Jordan, approached me with a proposition. "I'm getting old and thinking about retiring. If you're interested, Jennifer, would you like to take over this store?" Jordan proposed to me at that time. My parents were actively helping with childcare, and I was thinking about getting a job. If I declined, the store would close down, which would surely inconvenience many of the regular customers. Considering this, I decided to accept the offer and take over the store. While attending to a regular customer today, an unexpected pair visited me. Indeed, the unexpected visitors were my former mother-in-law and ex-husband. "Wow, this is a nice shop for you to have." "Yeah, Mom, look, this fabric seems like it would suit you." Annoyed by their transparent flattery, I asked, "What brings you here?" My former mother-in-law then demanded, "Give me back my grandson." It appeared she had somehow learned about my child's birth and wanted him as the heir to their family. "You were already pregnant when I demanded the divorce. Why did you keep quiet if I had known?" "I wouldn't have gone through with the divorce," my ex-husband accused me. "That's exactly why I wanted a divorce. If you had known about the pregnancy, you would have used any means to stop the divorce." I glared at my ex-husband and former mother-in-law. My former mother-in-law then demanded, "So are you going to give me back my grandchild or not? I want to live with my grandchild soon. You've had enough time with him for 3 years. It's my turn now," she said, making another absurd statement. As I stood there in disbelief, my parents and Jack appeared, asking, "What's the matter? Is there a problem?" It seemed they were alerted by a regular customer and had hurried over to help, seeing Jack holding hands with my parents. My former mother-in-law tried to approach him, saying, "Oh, how cute, he looks just like my son when he was a child. Look, I'm your grandma." I tried to stop her, but it wasn't necessary. Jack clung to my mother, saying, "This is my only grandma, so would you mind leaving now?" My mother asked. My former mother-in-law just gave a strange smile and moved closer to Jack. I stood in front of Jack to protect him, but being much smaller, I was easily pushed aside. "Jack, be careful," I cried out. My ex-husband was inches away from grabbing Jack's arm, but then his body suddenly flew through the air. Looking up, I saw my father, who had just performed a shoulder throw. Yes, my father had thrown my ex-husband in the nick of time. Unknown to my ex-husband, my father was a police officer with national-level judo skills. In pain and unable to speak, my ex-husband just looked pitifully at my father. "If you continue to bother my child or grandchild, I'll have to take action," my father warned, showing his police badge. Upon seeing this, my former mother-in-law, pale-faced, quickly pulled my ex-husband away and fled. I don't know what happened to them afterward. And frankly, I don't want to. Several years later, inspired by my father, Jack started aspiring to become a police officer. "I'll be a police officer when I grow up," he said, working hard in his studies to achieve this goal. He's now unbeaten in judo among his peers, trained by my father. I'm looking forward to watching my son grow into a fine person.